Hey, what's up, people from YouTube? This is Mojo here from Future Culture Records, and I want to welcome you to another of our track deconstructions. In this time, I'm gonna be deconstructing an old track of mine that was the third release of the label, and the name of that track is Crystaline, which is a deep house kind of track, with a little bit of acid in there. So I'm gonna go right into the computer and show you how every piece was made. So let's go into a review. Alright guys, so I'm gonna show you how I did this track. I did this track a long time ago. It's called Crystaline. And this track was entirely made here in Raccoon Sound Studios. It was entirely made with some drum machines and some synthesizers. So I'm gonna give you a quick rundown of how the track sounds. Yep, the track is kind of like an acid deep house vibe. Very inspired in kind of the Chicago house. So just fast forward a little bit. Yep, so there's a little acid bass line, some 909 drums, some pads, playing some jazzy chords, and a few other melodic parts that kind of make the song complete. So, as you can see, it's a pretty mellow track. With very deep elements and stuff, quite melodic as well. A few extra melodies on the break, and then goes back to the acid part. So those are basically the main elements in the track. That's more or less the vibe of the track. So I'm gonna run you element by element kind of and show you how all of this was made. This track was done a long time ago, so I'm kind of trying to find where everything is, but usually I work pretty organized and I have my way of lining up my instruments across the mixer, if you will, and having the tracks really organized. I always keep, for example, my drums to the left and so on, I keep going. So anyway, I'm gonna just solo the drums, and these drums we're using making the TR8. Right now in the studio we have the TR8S, but we still keep our TR8 here. And it was basically made using the TR8. As you can see, there's some bass drum. Let me loop in a part where all the drums are in. So I'm gonna loop this part. So as you can see, 909 drum. So I think this is just a 909 kick. So some offbeat snares, some open hats. This clap, 909 clap, and then this little 16 pattern that serves sort of like a shaker. Is just actually the crash of the 909 with the decay reduced to the most. So that's that. And let me see, and then I think there's a few rim shots, or what is it? No, this is just some rides, again, some 909 rides. But I don't know if you're hearing here, this was I put in the original track. There's also a little bit of flanger on that ride, and maybe a few more of the elements. But if you hear the track, which is released you will hear a little bit of flanger on the rides, and that was using a plugin called the Tal Flanger, which unfortunately, when I upgraded to Ableton 10, I kind of lost it, and I don't use it. But now I use some good flangers from D16. D16 has some really nice plugins, so I use the Antresol nowadays. But before I used to use the Tal Audio. So as you can see, the drums were pretty much they were performed. I made a little groove on the TR8, and the TR8 didn't have multi outputs, at least not too many, so I couldn't do it the whole jam in one take. So what I did is I recorded, for example, the kick. I just recorded a line with the kick, a line with the snare, and I kind of improvised a little bit. I opened the decays, I added some extra notes in the middle. But I recorded some loops into the clip view, individually for each drum instrument here, and I just made some variations within that loop. So that snare, I added some delay afterwards in Ableton, but that rim shot, I'm sorry. And then, for example, on the clap, there's it goes like this, and then it does like little rolls. So they're kind of different along the sections of the track, and that's because I created different takes while I was recording that audio, and I recorded into the clips different takes with different variations for each instrument. And then we have the classic open hat. Again, in here there's some variation, maybe with the decay of the instrument opening and closing, to create some tension in some parts. And then if we go to this little shaker kind of thing, which is actually a crash, yeah, it's also, there's some parts where I open the decay slightly, and that adds a little bit of tension to the track. So then on the ride, it goes the same. There's maybe some pitching up and down of the ride, and some decay automations that I did by hand when I was recording the audio. So I recorded, once I had everything recorded into different clips to be able to treat each individual drum separately. Once I had that going, then the drums, let me see what I have in the processing. Actually, there's not too much in the processing. All I did in the processing was, at the end, I added this Pultec EQ, and just added there, so that without doing anything to the EQ, actually, because just adding it there, I think it adds a little bit of color. Then there's some filter in the whole drum kit that kind of filters out all the drums in some part of the track. And then there's a little bit of an 1176 to compress everything slightly on the drums. So if I just just a little bit of compression to make things pop a little bit, and then at the end I have some Studer here to add just a little bit of warmth, a little bit of hiss maybe to the drums, and give a little bit of an old school touch. So then yeah, there might be some EQ in here on the hats. I just cut off the lows, same here. On the clap, I also cut the lows, boost a little bit in around the 1K section and the frequency spectrum, just to give it a little bit more crack in there. And then the crash, as I said, I had the Tal Audio flanger, and then it has some autopan that kind of like moves it from left to right, creates a little extra movement right there. And then I have these snare rolls that these were actually, oh yeah, these were actually made using Ableton. If I'm not mistaken, yeah. I think after I created that part, yeah, I just did a snare 707, and it's just for these parts. That, let me see, where is that? Or because I think I did that snare roll, and yeah, no, that snare roll is actually from the TR8. I ended up not using the 707 track, so yeah, that caused a little confusion, and then in some sections I have a little bit of a crash. That is also a low cut, and then if we see here, I'm sending it to a delay and a reverb. Then finally, for some transitioning, you know, here I have some reverse cymbals, you know, that I must have just grabbed a 909 like a 909 crash or something in Ableton, and I just reversed it and put it in those parts. Cut the lows, and again added a little bit of delay and reverb. So those basically are the drums. I'm gonna go to the other part here, which is the acid bass line. And let me try to find it here. Yeah, it's this one here. So again, this is I mean, you can call it a bass line, but in reality this is, I mean, it kind of serves like as a melody in the track, you know. I mean, it's let me see, yeah, it's kind of like in the it has a little bit of content, you know, like below 100, but then it has a lot of tone, you know. So the other thing I did is I used this bass tom that I think I used it from the Analog Rhythm, if I'm not mistaken, which serves the purpose kind of like a sub, you know. And that goes, let's see if, where's the bass, where is it, because bass EQ, yeah, because I actually on these instruments I passed them on the TB3 and on the tom. I did a little bit of hardware EQing here on the board of the studio. So I used this Rupert Neve Designs 551. I believe that I did that. It's pretty good for boosting bass. I really like how it sounds on bass, so I used that to, you know, just add a little bit of color to this kind of like a low tom, you know, that's serving as the bass line. And then on the TB3, I can't remember, I'm not sure which one I used. I think it was the SSL EQ that there's here in the board in the studio. There's that SSL EQ that I used to do a little bit of compression, so I kind of like re-recorded the lines once I had the arrangement and recorded them through those processors. So that's why we have it says TB3 EQ and bass EQ. So for the bass, like I said, I use the Analog Rhythm, which has some really nice low toms that you can use kind of as bass lines or subs, you know, to add kind of like a little play to your kick. And then for the TB3 is actually the Roland Ira TB3 that I used, that they had in the studio here at that moment, you know. So it's not here anymore in the studio, but it used to be pretty cool, you know. Especially I didn't like so much the program aspect of it and some parameters that it had, but I think it was missing for like an acid machine. But it had this little cool thing that kind of like similar like to the TR8, that you kind of create like some stutters in the notes. So to give some variation to the line, sometimes I do this thing that kind of like repeats the notes. I don't know if you're gonna hear it, but it should be coming. Yeah, there was one. So it creates, you know, I pressed pad on the machine and it kind of created these like stutters in the notes that you had. So this kind of like, yeah, stuttering in the notes, so it created some extra variety, you know, to the line. So that's what I did for that TB3, and then I passed it obviously through the hardware EQ and did a little bit of compression on it. I think I also did the compression on hardware, which I probably use the SSL EQ or the API EQ, the 527 that there's here in the studio. And that is for the bass parts. So we have the drums, we have the bass tom, and we have the TB3, right? So wait, the bass EQ, that's the one. And these are, and actually, you know, for the drums, I also might have done, here I see that I have something called drums final. Yeah, which is just like the whole drums kit recorded in one stem. And I might have processed also that on some hardware EQ here in the studio. But anyway, now that we have, I'm just gonna solo the drums, the TB3 EQ and the bass EQ. Right. So we had that also in the beginning section. If we look at the TB3, I did some editing here. So the normal line goes like, kind of like, that's the basic line, but I kind of made some cuts here, so I just cut like the beginning section. So it's just a little bit of cutting that I did, you know, and then again some cutting and that I did by myself after the recording, you know. I kind of you know, just chopped everything around a little bit here. Yeah, that was actually, yeah, so something like that. All right, so that's how that TB3, it also has some reverb and some, what does it have? It has this send def, which was, let me see, oh, it had some distortion actually also by send, so parallel here. So with this is from UAD, this raw distortion pedal. So yeah, and I believe I did some, because the stem is printed with delay, I think. Yeah, so I must have added, you know, like in the other, yeah, here's the processing that I did. So some EQing to cut the lows, some delay there, a little bit of compression right there, just to control those peaks in that. And also when the filter is opening in that TB3, you know, that acid line, it also benefits from a little bit of compression. And then that was printed into this TB3 EQ that, like I said, I did some extra EQ on the board. After that, we have the pads. So if I just close these drum stems, which the pad plays a main role here too. So pads were from the Juno 106. Here in the, let me find where those pads are. Yeah, Juno. I also passed it through some EQ, so just playing some jazzy chords, you know, 2 chords really, just lingering all along the track. And the filter also opens a little bit in the part, so. And then I added a little bit of delay to that too, and that's added through, if I go to Juno, or is there a Juno original track? I think I have it, but there's just some delay on the breakdown especially, so that it becomes a little more dreamy in that part. And then there's also like a kind of like a bigger reverb applied to that, so it sends it to the back a little bit more. So yeah, that was with the Juno. Is one of my favorite machines here at the studio. You know, it's awesome. Has that kind of like old school flavor with a little bit of noise, and that chorus, that unmistakable chorus. You know, that can't go wrong with it. I use it a lot for pads, some effects, some bass lines sometimes, but I use it a lot for pads. I really like how it sounds with pads. After the Juno, we have some effects that is kind of interesting. You know, this was kind of recorded by mistake. So that little thing that it was actually recorded. I recorded like I cut like away a piece of like some doodling that I was doing with the Juno, and you know, I just cut it, and it was that. So it also has some EQ here, you know, controlling the low mids, and it has, you know, it opens up with the filter actually from Ableton, you know. Without the filter, it sounds like that. So it just opens up with that filter from Ableton. And then I have some effects from the Juno. Like I said, you know, just some like swishes and stuff like that that goes in the before everything comes back in. Now we have this ARP Odyssey. I used the ARP Odyssey too for something. Let me see what it was. Oh no, I think this is actually the original audio from the Juno in this part. This project is kind of old, so some of the parts I can't remember, but it sounds more like the Juno. I just wanted to record something in the ARP Odyssey that day, and I didn't do it, you know, so that's why this channel is called ARP Odyssey. Yeah. So then I have this little part right here, which is this melody, and that was using one of the sounds from the Nord Stage 2. Here this red keyboard right here that has a lot of cool pianos, you know, some electronic pianos, Rhodes, some organs. I think this was kind of like an organ preset or something like that. And there's a funny story about that, because I had the track almost finished, and I had a friend come over to the studio one of those days. It's my friend Estela Romand. She's a really good piano player, so she came, and you know, we were just like listening to the track. She just sat down by the Nord and started playing along to the track, and without you knowing, Estela, I recorded what you were playing. And it was a big line that she recorded, but one of the parts, it sounded like this, and I think I did I think I cut some of the parts that she played, and I composed it into this little line. Yeah, that kind of goes in the breakdown, and then a little later in the track, and then added some in that one. There's some delay and reverb also. So and I think the delay came directly from the Nord. So I just added some reverb to that, and I also passed it through an EQ in the console, just to cut the lows a little bit and make it kind of like a little brighter and add a little flavor to that. So thank you, Estella, for that line. That was really cool. It actually kind of perfectly fit the track because I was almost done with the track, like I said, and it was missing something. And then Ella just came and started jamming, and I secretly recorded her on that and then just sampled it a little bit. So then we have these things called licks, which it's called licks, I don't know why, but it's kind of like a little string here that comes in the breakdown to add a little bit of atmosphere to that. And then there's also some a noise pad here. It's kind of running through the break. I must have done that on the Juno, I think. And then finally we have this high string here, which is also from the North Stage 2. And yeah, it has a little bit of sidechain to the kick so that it kind of bounces with that. And basically just filter automation here that it opens up and EQing only to the top, so you can only hear it, and it's kind of really low in the mix. You can kind of hear it when the filter starts opening. So that's a little bit of that drama to this track. And then I don't know why I call this DJ group, but it's basically the vocals. It's basically the vocals in the track, you know that. So it has those little girl vocals, you know, coming in and out with some samples, some acapella, you know. I just grabbed and took a little snippet of it, and then obviously I applied some reverb and delay to that to send it to the back. And that's pretty much this whole track, you know. There's not too much going on, you know. I like to keep things simple. Kind of a fan of like minimalistic music and not adding too much crap in there, so that it kind of like defeats the purpose of the whole track, you know. I kind of like to keep my elements clean and have everything sounding where it should, you know, and keep it as little as possible, you know. Less is more, they say so. The other thing is maybe for the mix, for the master that I did for this track, I guess, you know, like I just add a little bit of glue compression here, you know, a little bit of tape also to add a little bit of color to, and kind of like glue everything together for the whole mix. And then here I have just a limiter. So that's the whole track playing together. So here comes the break, the melody. Hear the noise in the back, you know, that's like a nice difference for the atmosphere. Oh yeah, and actually, you know, I'm missing this sample here, but I did, you know, I remember I said I didn't use the 707 kick, this is the 707 snare, but actually right now, like, since it's an old session, you know, it's missing the sample. But there's a little bit of a drum roll, you know, that comes before the drop, if you want to call it that, you know. There's a little bit of a drum roll, you know, that goes there. I don't know if I add like a 707 kick, if you guys will be able to hear it, so to see how it sounds. 707 snare, I keep saying kick. So yeah, so if I add it, you might be able to hear it. So that was it for that, you know, just some cutting on the lows, and you know, also I think there's some filter automation that's there in some parts, maybe here in this part. So yeah, so you can see. Yep. So as you can see, you know, like a lot of the life from this track came from me jamming, you know, and kind of like recording the whole thing, the drums, you know, kind of like making those variations, you know, in the parameters while I was recording, and the TV3 also, like adding those little stutters that kind of like creates that extra variation on the melody. And also on the Juno, you know, just like playing with the parameters